Hi, it's me. I'm here. And I've got a great show here for you on a Monday at the final week of January, which I think is good, right? Anya Kamenetz is joining me. I think you're really going to like it. We've got a hangout tonight. Lots to look forward to. You're alive, so let's get going. Time to stand up. Stand up. Hey there, I hope you had a good weekend and found some joy and relaxed and did good things. And if not, if you're scared, you're anxious, you're alone, then join us at tonight's hangout, because you're not alone in those feelings. We're all feeling really worried about what is happening each and every day as we descend into chaos, into authoritarian and oligarchic rule, it would seem. But I have hope. I remain positive, and I look for the helpers, try to be a helper, find the light, find the joy. So many of you provide that. I hope you'll join us at our hangout tonight. I hope you'll consider coming to join us in person for PODJAM, which is going to be an awesome 3 days at the end of March. Get your tickets now. There's a link in the show notes, and let's get it going, okay? I've got your good stuff coming up. My conversation with Anya Kamenetz starts at about 41 minutes into today's show. If you want to skip the good stuff and get the headlines and clips, that begins at about 6 minutes in. But I like to kick it off here at the top with something hopeful, inspiring, happy, humorous. Those are the criteria for the good stuff. So what have I got for you today? How about Dan Harris? He was on MSNBC talking to Nicole Wallace last week, trying to help, as he always does, from 10% Happier. We love Dan, and he was talking to him a little bit about the difference between empathy and compassion. I like this a lot and thought it would be suitable for the good stuff.
I think a key thing that's helpful is to know the difference between empathy and compassion. Empathy is a hardwired trait that we all have, or most of us have, which is to feel other people's feelings. However, you can get swamped in that. If you're just feeling it and there's no break on it. Compassion is empathy plus the desire to help, even when you can't help. So if you're watching the news and you're seeing people who are suffering, there's a little Buddhist phrase you can drop in your mind, which is, may you be free from suffering. And that switches the mind from overwhelm and then a desire to unplug and tune out and numb out, to leaned in, empowered, ennobled. And then even if there's nothing you can do, you can still wish that they be free from suffering. But you may also start to see in that clearer mindset, well, here's something I can do. I can send money. I can volunteer. Yeah. That, and as we've discussed before, action absorbs anxiety. That is the way out of this, I think, for many of us.
All right. Like that from Dan Harris. And I also like this from Mel Robbins, who a few people have suggested I take a listen to. She's very popular. People have said, why don't you just get her on the show? I don't know. She's one of the most popular people, apparently, in her lane of kind of self-help and motivation. And she's kind of a tough, no-nonsense woman that gives great advice, and she's self-deprecating and introspective, but also pretty smart woman. Anyway, here she is talking about how to deal with anxiety. I thought this was pretty good. And no, I didn't add the music to it.
Catastrophizing. If you catch yourself in that, what if this, what if that, if you let your thoughts spin, anxiety is literally nothing more than you thinking about something in the future and thinking about it in a manner where it starts to sound an alarm in your body. First of all, if you catch yourself worrying, if you catch yourself out in the future catastrophizing, if you catch yourself in that, what if this, what if that, if you let your thoughts spin, it will spin you out of control, and then you're going to start to feel anxious. And so you want to count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And one of the best, most effective things you can insert as a different pattern is this. What if it all works out? What if it all works out? What if I get on this plane and even though it's bumpy, it still lands and it all works out? Because you can't argue with that. If you can stabilize your thoughts, your body settles down and it doesn't escalate. So you're going to interrupt the worry, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you insert something else. You can also say this moment will pass. You can say I can handle this, but you've got to interrupt those thoughts and insert something else.
Yes, you've got to interrupt those thoughts and insert something else. That's good advice, especially when you're reading about the latest crazy thing in the news in our world. All right, and I also wanted to play one more thing. I like when actors read poetry. Here's the great Irish actor Cillian Murphy reading W.B. Yeats' When You Are Old.
When you are old. When you are old and grey and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once, and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love false or true. But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur, a little sadly, how love fled and paced upon the mountains overhead, and hid his face amid a crowd of stars.
And there you go. That is your good stuff for today. Hopefully that starts off your day good somehow. Maybe resonates, maybe doesn't. I'm always happy to hear from you what you think I should include, play, read, say. I'd love to hear it. So send it my way. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Now time for your headlines from the weekend and the last 24 hours. A lot to talk about. Of course, a lot of attention being paid to what happened with the countries of Colombia and Brazil refusing to accept U.S. military planes deporting immigrants. Set up furious reaction to the bad man. He got very angry. He announced a barrage of tariffs and sanctions targeting Colombia, which has long been a top U.S. ally in Latin America. Our wannabe tyrant went on social media platform that he owns, which we don't talk about enough, and put out a statement saying that the United States will immediately impose a 25% tariff on all Colombian imports and will raise them to 50% in 1 week. The Trump administration will also fully impose banking and financial sanctions against Colombia and will apply a travel ban and revoke visas of Colombian government officials. Colombia's leftist president, Gustavo Petro, hit back at President Trump. In one social media post, he announced retaliatory tariffs of 25% on U.S. imports to Colombia. And in another, a longer post, he said those tariffs would hit 50%, directly addressing the bad man. Mr. Trump also questioned whether the American president was trying to topple him. You don't like our freedom? Fine. I do not shake hands with white enslavers. Ooh, it's getting real ugly. The feud reflects how the president is making an example out of Colombia as countries around the world grapple with how to prepare for the mass deportations of unauthorized immigrants that he's promised. And like I said, Brazil's government expressed outrage over the weekend on Saturday after dozens of immigrants deported by the United States arrived by plane in handcuffs. They handcuffed them on the plane, calling it a flagrant disregard for their human rights. The Foreign Ministry said it would demand an explanation from Washington over the, quote, degrading treatment of passengers on the flight. When the plane landed in the northern city of Manaus, Brazilian authorities ordered U.S. officials to immediately remove the handcuffs, according to the Justice Ministry. And Brazil said it would request explanations from the U.S. government about the degrading treatment of passengers. The government said 88 Brazilians were aboard the aircraft. So let's see what happens with all of that. I mean, you got to look at the products that each country imports and exports, but Colombia exports like about a third of our flowers apparently here and a lot of our coffee beans. So are we all going to pay a lot more for coffee? You can't do that. You can't grow coffee in America. You just can't, no matter what, apparently. I was looking into that. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. Kevin, anybody listening, tell me, but closely following those stories. What else do I have for you? Well, over the weekend, huge controversy that has gone, I feel like, undercovered to a certain extent, although it was covered on the Sunday shows. The Trump administration fired 17 independent inspectors general at government agencies, a sweeping action to remove oversight. Doesn't want any oversight of the new administration. Some members of Congress are suggesting it violates federal oversight laws. The dismissals began Friday night, were effective immediately, according to two people familiar with the actions. They spoke on condition of anonymity to provide details that had not been made public. Neither confirmed the exact number of firings, but an email sent by one fired inspectors general said roughly 17 had been removed. Trump confirmed the move in a conversation with reporters at Air Force One on Saturday, claiming it's a very common thing to do. He said he would put good people in there that will be very good. Yeah, right. Okay. Congress is not given the legally required 30-day notices about the removals, something that even top Republicans are decrying. And you'll hear that coming up in the sound bites. What else do I have for you? Oh, over the weekend, U.S. tech billionaire and neo-Nazi man-boobed Elon Musk gave a video address to a campaign rally of Germany's anti-immigration far-right AfD party on Saturday. His latest show of support ahead of the country's election next month. He told a gathering of thousands of AfD supporters in the eastern city of Halle that their party was the best hope for a future of Germany. He's raised concern from mainstream leaders who have accused him of interfering in European politics with comments on his social media platform that he owns about politicians in countries including Germany and Britain. And, well, like Trump, the FD opposes immigration, denies climate change, rallies against gender politics, and has declared war on political establishment and mainstream media it condemns as censorious. Ahead of Germany's February 23 elections, it's polling around 20%, a new record for a party that's already shattered a decades-old taboo against the far right in post-war Germany. Wow. Well, that's another story, obviously, to watch. We have to watch Elon Musk each and every day now that he's got an office in the West Wing. Over the weekend, we learned Hamas will release 6 hostages. Israel will allow Gazans to return to their homes, whatever's left of them, if anything's left of them, in the north today. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Hamas released 4 soldiers on Saturday. Israel accused Hamas of breaching the ceasefire deal under which Israeli civilians were to be freed in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners. Since the ceasefire deal came into force, 7 hostages, more than 200 prisoners have been released. Israeli troops prevented Palestinians from returning to their homes in northern Gaza yesterday after Israel accused Hamas of violating the terms of the ceasefire agreement. Trump said that he told Jordan's leader that he wants Jordan and Egypt to receive more Palestinians from Gaza. I think he wants to build a hotel in Gaza on the beach. It's basically a demolition site, Trump said. In Lebanon, Israeli forces killed at least 2 people as the deadline for Hezbollah and Israel to withdraw from the south expired, and thousands of displaced Lebanese tried to return to their homes. Authorities in South Korea indicted the president there on charges of leading an insurrection when he briefly imposed martial law last month. And in a rare display of public dissent in China, top doctors raised concerns about domestically produced drugs. They said the government was sacrificing quality to cut costs. Well, guess what? Our oligarchy is going to remove regulations from the FDA to allow American pharmaceutical companies to do that as well and probably indemnify them in addition to boot. In addition and to boot, I think are the same thing. Let's go to the California fires. Los Angeles, getting rain and hail, I'm seeing, that should help fire crews. Also faces a small risk now of flash floods and mudslides. Apparently, after the fires, rents spiked past the legal limit in nearly 30 cities across Los Angeles. Washington Post, according to they found. And even before the fires, film and television production in Los Angeles was hitting a record low. So the LA economy getting hit really hard as a result of all of this. And Trump's CIA is now saying that they favor the theory that COVID emerged from a leak at the Wuhan Research Lab. I am just reading that here as well, part of headlines. All right, those are the headlines that I've gathered for you today. Now it's time to get to those news clips, the audio, the soundbite that so many of you tell me you love that I gather. So I've got a good selection for you today. Let's start with this clip sent to me by Phil Round, longtime listener, lives out in Jackson Hole. We love Phil, and I love when people send me clips I probably otherwise wouldn't have seen. This is from Politics Girl, who has got a big show. Everybody knows Politics Girl, right? Her actual name is Lee McGowan, and she was talking to Mark Elias of Democracy Docket, who's always great, and I thought this was a good 3 minutes of despair and advice.
I feel like most of us who believe in democracy and fairness and the rule of law are feeling a struggle with keep fighting and demoralization, right? And I think that's a very lonely feeling. And so would you talk to me about what you meant when you said we're all on our own?
Yeah. So look, I think we have seen the utter collapse of 3 very important institutions for American government and American democracy. Number one, we have seen the utter collapse of the business community, which, you know, whether you like big business or don't like big business, whether you like with this industry or not, one of the truths is that we have counted on business leaders and corporate leaders to view democracy and rule of law as good for business and therefore be strong supporters of it. Instead, what we have seen is them fly their private jets to Mar-a-Lago to see who can bow deeper, who can bend their knee more, and who can make themselves more pathetically subservient to Donald Trump and be part of his court jesters. So we have seen the utter collapse of the business community, which is really problematic. Number two, we have seen, frankly, the retreat of many parts, not all, but many parts of the legacy media. It is not just the Washington Post. It is not just CNN. It is not just certain hosts on certain broadcast, on certain networks that will go unnamed. It is a wholesale retreat of the legacy media from being entities that view themselves as pro-democracy. They're not largely pro-democracy. What it turns out is that they're owned by the same billionaire class or the same multinational corporations that are bending their knee for other reasons. And so if you own a rocket company and you sell things on the internet and you want to be able to sell those things to the government, and you also own a newspaper, well, the newspaper is expendable, right? And so it is critical that people reframe their thinking about the media. Right now, you have more freedom. I can say on your show, fuck Donald Trump. You could say fuck Donald Trump. And the fact is, the big titans of industry, they can't say that. And the owners of legacy media, they can't say that. And so the fact is, we have seen the collapse of legacy media as a watchdog and a sentinel for democracy, and that's a big deal. And then the third one is the Republican Party. I'm a partisan Democrat. I've been a partisan Democrat, but you need to have a strong two-party system in order for democracy to work. And right now, there is no second party. The Republican Party is just a personalist party of Donald Trump. There is nothing else. Donald Trump chooses the speaker. Donald Trump tells the speaker which members of leadership to fire. Donald Trump tells John Thune who he's going to send for nominations. He's going to expect every Republican to vote to confirm them, which, by the way, they will. And so, the collapse of the Republican Party is sort of the third leg of undercutting the democracy. So that's when I say we feel alone. We feel alone because we counted on corporate America. We counted on leadership in civil society. We counted on the media to stand with us. And we thought there would be elements of the Republican Party that would at least put speed bumps in place. And none of those are there. Lee, it's you and me and your listeners. It's you and me and your viewers. It's a handful of others and some Democratic leaders, like I said, some governors, some members of Congress and the House and the Senate, but we are largely on our own, but we cannot back down.
All right. We cannot back down. He is right. He's absolutely right. I love that. And I also like this. This is great commentary from longtime Colorado commentator, local news guy, Kyle Clark. You've probably seen some of his stuff before. He hosts his own show out there on 9 News. And this is great, just a great commentary on all the ridiculousness around DEI and specifically around the FEMA administrator, who is a woman, Biden's FEMA administrator, is also a longtime Coloradan. And I like this a lot. I think it's great. This guy's great. So I want to share this with you.
Republican congressman calling FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell a DEI hire isn't subtle or clever or accurate. It's sexist. And it's deeply, deeply dumb. A Republican Coloradan has a ton of experience in emergency management in the public and private sector, decades of service in the Colorado Air National Guard, and she has the public administration degree and the work to clearly qualify her for the role. That's why Republicans and Democrats unanimously confirmed her to lead FEMA. But sexist and racist trolling now passes for political thought these days. You'll hear the slur DEI hire being thrown at anyone under scrutiny who is not a straight white man. Again, it's not subtle, it's not clever, it's not accurate. Every American, regardless of politics, but especially straight white guys, should make it clear. Criticizing somebody's decision-making, that's fair game. But if the best you've got is a shot at their race, sexuality, or gender, then please rephrase your concern.
Yeah, well done, Kyle Clark, as always. And now, how about this? This is Canadian Conservative Party leader. His name is Pierre Poilievre. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but very popular among American conservatives. He vowed to retaliate if he's elected prime minister and Trump starts a trade war with his country. So I thought this was really interesting from CTV News.
For the past few days now, opposition leader, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre has been on a swing through the Maritimes, driving this time.
Yes.
Yeah, hit the road. He joins us in studio. We're happy to have him with us. Welcome back.
It's great to be back.
We are a week away now from American tariffs with almost all certainty. There's a real concern, I'm sure you've heard it in this region, about the potential impacts. I'm wondering if you can tell our viewers one specific thing, if you were in power, that you would do to respond to those.
Well, I don't want to, if you don't mind, I'd like to list a few things. One would obviously...
The more you want to list, the better.
Thank
I think
you.
People would like to get some specifics about how we're going to tackle this.
Look, President Trump is a deal maker. He wants to win. But we're both going to lose as Americans and Canadians if we get into a trade war. So what I would say is, how do we position the decision for him so that he understands that America can only win if it allows open, unbridled free trade with Canada? So I would retaliate, and I would target products and services that, A, we don't need, B, we can make ourselves, and C, that we can buy elsewhere so that we maximize impact on the Americans while minimizing impact on Canadians. Secondly, I would to pass an emergency, bring it home tax cut on work, investment, making stuff in Canada, energy, home building, so that we can stimulate more economic growth here. 3, we need to become more self-sufficient. That means knocking down barriers, more interprovincial free trade. We have freer trade with the Americans today than we do with ourselves. We have to knock down those barriers, build pipelines, LNG liquefaction facilities to sell our stuff to the world without having to go through the Americans. If they're going to be an unreliable trade partner, we've got to find ways to sell more to ourselves and more to the rest of the world.
Wow, how about that? The potential leader, conservative leader of Canada, not going to take that sitting down if he does, in fact, get elected. He sounds smart and reasonable. All right, well, let's go to Elie Mystal. He was on MSNBC with our friend Ali Velshi, two of our friends talking, and I saw this clip and fire as always.
We tried to tell y'all. I mean, Ali, I wrote specifically about this issue, what he was going to do to the Department of Justice multiple times during the election cycle, because as you pointed out in your open, this was all written down. So I don't like the shock and awe version of this, because if you had been paying attention, they wrote it down. They told you exactly what they were going to do and exactly how you were going to do it. And a majority of white people voted for this. This is the disgusting version of America that people want. And oh, by the way, eggs are still more expensive. So you didn't even get that. Great job, white folks. In terms of how we cover it as a media or as a media group, right? We have to stop acting like any of these things have any basis in reality, right? Your earlier segment about birthright citizenship is a perfect example of how you should cover it. There is no question about whether or not birthright citizenship is constitutional. It just is, right? There is no question about whether or not the Civil Rights Act should apply. It just does. And every time the media tries to sane wash Trump, whitewash Trump, explain Trump, defend Trump, what they're doing is muddying the waters on these issues that we have already decided, right? And I'm not saying that there's not a place for nuance. I actually wrote in The Nation about how if Trump wants to end DEI programs, that's legal. DEI is a policy. DEI is a policy invented by white folks to try to stop other white folks from being racist. If they want to end the policy, the next media question shouldn't be like, oh my God, you're ending DEI. The next media question should be, okay, so what are you doing to combat racism in employment and hiring? What are you doing to combat sexism in employment and hiring in the federal government, the largest employer in the country? Because if the answer is nothing, well, then that becomes illegal. Well, then that violates the Civil Rights Act. That violates the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the Equal Protection Clause. So the question has to be, fine, you want to end DEI, what's next, right? It's all like, you're going to repeal it. What are you going to replace it with? Because just going back to antebellum racism, that's what's illegal.
Yeah, Mystal on fire, and Segall said some of that yesterday on Sundays with Segall. Did you hear it yesterday? I posted a show with Eric on Saturday, a great conversation with Christian Finnegan. If you missed them, both worth listening to, of course. And so is this. This is the former CIA director under Obama. His name is John Brennan. Pretty smart guy, long career in national security and specifically intelligence. He was on MSNBC with Michael Steele. So I thought this was worth listening to as well.
That bad actor is okay because she's had a past relationship with that bad actor or that country in some form or fashion. How does what she put in that influence the decisions of the president? It's one thing to say, well, he gets the briefing. We know Donald Trump don't read, so there is that. But everybody else in that orbit does. How does bad information in result in bad actions on the other side?
Well, when there are National Security Council meetings that the president chairs in the White House Situation Room, usually the first person to speak would be the Director of National Intelligence and the Director of CIA. They lay down the intelligence basis for any type of policy discussion that ensues. And so if that intelligence basis, that briefing, is going to be skewed or is going to be lacking some very important critical information, the policy decision that ultimately comes out of it is also going to be baseless, and also, it's going to be potentially threatening to our national security. So, again, it's the President's daily brief, but also the role that the Director of National Intelligence, Director of CIA play in order to ensure that the people who have to make those decisions in the National Security Council are fully informed about what the reality is, what the intelligence is, what our intelligence gaps are, and if they withhold things or if they skew things, it really is going to be detrimental to
real quick before.
All right, there you go. John Brennan on MSNBC. And J.B. Pritzker is the governor of Illinois. And he was on CNN. And I thought this was a very, very important piece of commentary that everybody should listen to and follow. Here is the governor of Illinois.
Neo-Nazis across the United States celebrated when he did that. That should be some indication to everybody about why this is so important for him to call out. Now, what has he followed up with? Jokes about Nazis. Jokes, like it's okay. And then showing up in a video presentation to the far right folks who are the most anti-Semitic in German politics, and and standing up for them and telling them, I'm for you. That's bad for the United States. It's bad for Jews across the world. It's bad for Germany. And President Trump ought to be calling that out. If he doesn't agree with Elon Musk, if he doesn't agree with two Sig Heils at his own rally, and backing a party that backs Nazis, then he ought to say so. Why isn't Donald Trump speaking out?
We know why he's not speaking out, because he loves it. He loves what is happening and the distraction that it is, and he's certainly not going to apologize for Elon Musk's or even admit that that was a Nazi salute. All right, here is American villain and border czar Tom Homan on ABC's This Week with Martha Raddatz, who does a pretty good job questioning him. I would have done it obviously a little bit differently than this, but I'm going to play the whole triggering, 4 minutes or so. It's really upsetting, but I think that we do need to hear this guy. He sounds like a real idiot. No offense to whatever his voice issue is, but he sounds real dumb. And it's hard to believe that he's not, because he talks like this and acts like this, but we shouldn't underestimate Tom Homan. Here he is.
I want to go back to who you're deporting. Aside from the long list of executive actions, the administration said it will no longer tell ICE agents they have to avoid sensitive locations, including schools, hospitals, churches. Benjamin Huffman, the acting Homeland Security Secretary, said in a statement, criminals will no longer be able to hide in America's schools and churches to avoid arrest. What criminals are hiding in schools? Middle schools, elementary schools. You going to go into those?
How many MS-13 members are the age of 14, 17? Many of them. So, look, if it's a national security threat, public safety threat, and what you need to understand is a case by case. Name another agency, another law enforcement agency that has those type of requirements that they can't walk into a school or a doctor's office or on a medical campus. No other agencies held to those standards. These are well-trained officers with a lot of discretion, and when it comes to sensitive location, there's still going to be supervisory review. So it's not like it's an open issue, but ICE officers should have discretion to decide if a national security threat or a public safety threat in one of these facilities, then there should be an option for them to make the arrest.
But someday you could go into those schools and grab people who are just in the country illegally.
On a case-by-case basis, depending who they are, what the circumstances are. It's never a zero game.
You know that this creates fear in the immigrant community. The chair of the U.S. Conference of Bishops Committee said turning places of care, healing, and solace into places of fear and uncertainty for those in need while endangering the trust between pastors, providers, educators, and the people they serve will not make our communities safer.
Well, look, here's I think. If Congress has a job to do, we're enforcing the laws Congress enacted and the president signed. If they don't like it, change the law. I find it hard to believe any member of Congress is telling us not to enforce the law that they enacted and they fund us to do.
But opening up to anyone who's in the country illegally and going into schools and grabbing them, does that kids, adults?
The message needs to be clear. There's consequences for entering the country illegally. If we don't show those consequences, you're never going to fix the border problem.
Estimates are that there are 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country right now. How can you possibly afford to deport all of those people?
Well, I'll leave it up to Congress. I think Congress, the president has a mandate. This was the number one issue that people voted on. I think Congress has a mandate to give us money we need. What price you put on national security?
More detention centers?
What price you put on all these young ladies have been raped and murdered and burned alive? What price you put on that? What price you put on Lincoln Riley's life? What price you put on national security? Like I just explained, when you have a surge like this, we don't secure that border. That's when national security threats enter the country. That's when sex trafficking goes up. That's when the fentanyl comes in that kills 250,000 Americans. I don't put a price on that.
And on those detention centers, do you need more beds? I think there's 41,000 now, 100,000. So where do you get those beds? Do you build more camps? Do you do this military installations in Texas and elsewhere?
A little bit of everything. We can build Southside facilities. We can expand our contracts to outside contractors. So yeah, we're going to need more ICE beds, a minimum of 100,000. Congress needs to come to the table quick and give us the money we need to secure that border.
Let's talk about those flights again. With the host countries, you flew all of those people back. Were all of the people arrested on the first day, for instance, repatriated? And what about those countries that won't take them back?
Oh, they'll take them back.
What do you mean by that?
We got President Trump coming to power. President Trump puts America first. Mexico didn't want to remain in the Mexico program. Under the first administration, they did it. They didn't want to put military in the southern border. They did it.
How do you convince them?
El Salvador didn't want to take MS-13 members back. It took President Trump 48 hours to make that happen. President Trump's going to put America first. And if it doesn't, then we'll place my third safe country.
All appointments through the CBP app have been canceled. That is a legal way to claim asylum and get in the country. So what should people do who are seeking asylum? How do you do it?
Go to the embassy, go to the port of entry. Do it the legal way. You shouldn't come to this country and ask to get asylum, and the first thing you do is break our laws by entering illegally.
So tell me what the definition of success is over the next 6 months, over the next year, by the end of the administration. What is mission accomplished here?
Taking as many public safety threats off the street as possible. Watching illegal alien crimes in the United States decrease. Ending it. Deporting every illegal alien gang member in this country, including Trendawa and MS-13. Making our country safe. When we see the crime rate from illegal aliens go down, that's a success. Every public safety threat we remove from this country is a success. Every national security threat that we find removed from the country is a success. There's no number on it. So my success can be based on what Congress gives us. More money, the better we're going to do.
I noticed you didn't put in that list of things that will be mission accomplished and success, getting every immigrant who is in the country illegally out. Why not?
Because I'm being realistic. We can do what we can with the money we have. We're going to try to be efficient, but with the more money we have, the more we can accomplish. If I don't have the money to remove that millions of people, I'm not going to sit here and... One thing, no one can say I haven't been frank in everything I've said. Our success every day is taking a public safety threat off the streets or getting a national security threat out of here.
All right. Well, are there really MS-13 gang members in schools? I mean, if there are, I agree that we should get them out. Or if they're convicted of a crime, if they're accused of crimes. I mean, what is that about? Is there 1? Is there 5? Is there 20? Are there hundreds? I have a hard time buying that or believing that. I think a lot of people, at least in my community, some of these kids that they think are undocumented. If they've got a tattoo, it means they're in a gang. People jump to a lot of conclusions, but I would like to see the data or the proof on that. And I wish you would have followed up and asked about it. Anyway, we're gonna have to deal with that guy and something. Just continued nightmares. All right, well, let's go to Congressman Jason Crow. I like this guy. He's an Afghan war veteran. He was there on January 6th, and he was on CBS with Margaret Brennan, who asked him about the pardons.
So on the conversation about January 6th that we had with the vice president, you've spoken about your experiences that day in very, very vivid terms. You talked about helping other lawmakers shelter. They were fearing for their lives, to help them put on gas masks. It's a picture of you that day, even fighting your way out of the chamber since you had combat experience. What's your response to the vice president's defense of pardoning some of these violent offenders?
Well, I don't want to hear Donald Trump or J.D. Vance or anyone else in this administration talk about backing the blue, talk about supporting law enforcement when they just released over 1,000 cop beaters, people who brutally beat our law enforcement. I was there. I saw it firsthand. America saw it firsthand. The video is available for anybody to view. The brutality, the injuries, over 150 of these officers still have injuries, several of whom lost their lives because of the injuries and trauma incurred on that day.
Yeah. Well done, Jason Crow. And there's a lot more where that came from. I like that guy. Now let's go to a scene from a movie. This might be a weird thing to drop in here, but I saw this and thought I would include it here at the end of the clips. This is a scene from a movie directed by Bobcat Goldthwait, back in 2011, I'm sorry. God Bless America. It's a black comedy. And it's, kinds of combines elements of political satire with dark humor. And this one scene I thought was so good at kind of capturing America's bro culture and lack of critical thinking. Just love this scene, so I wanted to include it for you today. Like these two guys sitting in an office cubicle, one young guy and a little bit older guy, and it's just perfect.
They were saying how their freedom of speech is in jeopardy. Well, you don't listen to them either?
No, I don't. I really don't like any of them.
How can you say that, bro? So maybe they're not politically correct, but it's funny, Frank.
Well, seeing how as I'm not afraid of foreigners or people with vaginas, I guess I'm just not their target audience.
You don't get it. If you got it, you wouldn't be so offended.
Oh, I get it. And I am offended. Not because I got a problem with bitter, predictable, whiny millionaire disc jockeys, or that we're supposed to support their freedom of speech when they don't give a fuck about yours or mine.
So you're against freedom of speech now?
I would defend their freedom of speech if I thought it was in jeopardy. I would defend their freedom of speech to tell uninspired, bigoted, blowjob, gay-bashing, racist, and rape jokes all under the guise of being edgy. But that's not the edge. That's what sells. They couldn't possibly pander any harder or be more commercially mainstream. Because this is the "oh no, you didn't say that" generation, where a shocking comment has more weight than the truth. No one has any shame anymore, and we're supposed to celebrate it. Kids beat each other blind and post it on YouTube. I mean, you remember when eating rats and maggots on Survivor was shocking? It all seems so quaint now. I mean, why have a civilization anymore if we no longer are interested in being civilized?
It's so good. I like that a lot and hope you do as well. All right, now some more jokes, some comedy from the Weekend Update. It's Michael Che and Colin Jost. Saturday Night Live this past weekend.
Well, guys, I was never really doing dry January, but this week I stopped even pretending. President Trump was sworn back into office on Monday, but he appeared to not place his hand on the Bible. Well, he tried to, but the Bible screamed. The Bible Trump used was the same one Abraham Lincoln used at his inauguration. And man, I wish those two could talk to each other. Lincoln could teach Trump a lot about the importance of preserving our union. And Trump could teach Lincoln how to turn your head at the exact right moment. During his address, President Trump said he was changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And like you, Hillary Clinton could be seen in the background laughing while he said it, while Kamala could be seen silently begging her edible to kick in.
President Trump pardoned Oath Keepers leader Stuart Rhodes, who was serving 18 years for his role in the January 6th attacks. And ladies, just like his eyes, he's single. President Trump defending his pardon of the January 6th attackers, saying that these are just people that love their country. You know, like how OJ loved Nicole. It's a dark update.
President Trump revealed what he called an inspirational letter that President Biden left him in the Oval Office, which read, "Enjoy it. Do a good job." Though Trump thought it was strange that the letter began, "Congrats on being the first black female president." The Trump administration said that ICE agents will now be permitted to arrest migrants in churches. And I can't wait until law enforcement bursts into a church and the priest is like, "Those kids are lying."
On President Trump's first day in office, he signed 26 executive orders, 12 memos, 4 proclamations, and revoked 78 Biden executive actions. And then that night, big clog in the toilet. Elon Musk was criticized for his speech at a rally after the inauguration in which he appears to give the Nazi salute. But come on, Elon Musk is not a Nazi. The Nazis made nice cars.
The White House shared images of illegal migrants being placed on military planes to be deported. And Trump said the deportations won't stop until a white kid wins the spelling bee.
Yesterday, President Trump and First Lady Melania surveyed hurricane damage in North Carolina, and for some reason, they were dressed like Jay and Silent Bob. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert tried to have a man kicked out of the women's room in the Capitol building, but it turned out to be a woman. In Boebert's defense, Marjorie was standing up.
Trump also signed an executive order directing the federal government to end all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Worse, the order began, listen up, gaywads.
All right, and there it is from the Weekend Update, Saturday Night Live. That's it. That's all I've got for you. The headlines, the clips, the good stuff. Now it's time to get to my great guest. She really is one of the smartest people I read and get to talk to. She speaks, she writes, she thinks about generational justice, raising thriving kids on a changing planet. Her newsletter is so good. It's called The Golden Hour. She covered education for many years for NPR, where she co-created the podcast Life Kit, Parenting. Her newest book, The Stolen Year, How COVID Changed Children's Lives and Where to Go, now is available. She's written 3 other really important books. She's an advisor to the Aspen Institute, the Climate and Mental Health Network, and you gotta subscribe to The Golden Hour right now. She's a Yale grad. I can't say enough good things about my friend Anya Kamenetz, and I caught up with her on Friday to talk about her latest piece at The Golden Hour, titled How to Read the News, a 5-step guide on that and much, much more. Let's do it right now. Go follow her, go support her, go subscribe to The Golden Hour. It's time for Anya Kamenetz.
Oh, thanks for having me, Pete. And I'm sure that person followed me because of you.
Perhaps, but shout out to Kim Nyborg. There's a lot of ways to find ourselves to your work because you've your very extensive, impressive career, but I just felt like that piece came right at the right time, the end of the first week of our descent into chaos. The second, how are you referring to it? And before we get to it, how are you doing?
I don't know how I'm doing, Pete. Like I was telling you, January 20th was my father's 75th birthday. So I took some girlfriends with me and went down to New Orleans for a very, very fun weekend.
Where your dad was, where you grew up.
Where my dad was. So to meet him there, yes, my family there.
It'd be so weird to celebrate your dad's birthday. You didn't even go see him. You just took girlfriends to New Orleans.
Well, so it's a long story, but we were planning a trip and we were like, maybe we'll go to Sedona. And then I was like, oh, you know what, guys, it's my dad's birthday. Would you guys come to New Orleans? And to their 201, they were like, absolutely, we'll come to New Orleans and have you plan a hometown weekend for us. And then go spend the time with your dad. So that's what we did. Then there was a massive, unprecedented weather event across many, many states. So I didn't get back for a week, but.
So when you see a weather event like that, you grew up in New Orleans, you never saw snow like that you saw there last week, which is crazy that you were there.
Yeah.
Now everybody starts talking about climate. It happens every time. Did you hear any of those or see any of those conversations? Because it wasn't just New Orleans, but the beaches of Florida in many places were covered with snow. And that creates an idea and an image in people's head that doesn't necessarily correspond with what the scientific consensus is around climate change. So do we want to dispense of that just briefly?
So, I mean, I guess one thing that people say is weather is not climate, but actually what's also the case is that this storm was caused by a disturbance in the polar vortex, which means that the wind patterns that we rely on for predictable weather are weakening and shifting. That cold Arctic air is supposed to stay up in the region of Minnesota and Canada, but it's been dipping down because of the irregularities in international wind patterns. And that's what actually caused this storm.
There you go. Well explained. And while we're talking about extreme weather events, I do just want to ask you your general thoughts or reactions to the fires, because you've had some really good coverage of that. And obviously you've covered that part of climate and that part of the country burning throughout your career as well. I don't know. I mean, this seems to me like, for lack of a better phrase, the perfect storm with the climatic changes that occurred. All the vegetation grows in the rain, no rain, it all gets dry, crazy amounts of winds like you've never seen, any number of sparks. And you have what you have, the way that we build and live. But maybe we're missing something in terms of what could have been done differently or stopped. But what are your thoughts on what's happened in Southern California and the reactions to it? Any of them, Anya?
Obviously, it's a human tragedy. I know 2 people personally who lost their homes. I know many people that evacuated, many people that are living in fear and in trauma, and worried about it happening again. I know that the real toll is going to be felt in the toxic ash and the air quality for many, possibly years to come. So my girlfriend came from LA, flew. She's fine. She chose to come out for the weekend with us and had a couple different encounters with local New Orleanians where they really had the most sincere heart going out to her and really understanding exactly what it means to have your hometown menaced in this way. And if you think about 20 years apart, Katrina and these fires, first of all, it feels like we learned so little about how to actually rebuild in a way that's sustainable. But what I also see is that when, people said, why don't we just abandon New Orleans? And that was the discourse. It was open. People said that. Yeah. Nobody's saying that about LA. But obviously
a lot more white people live in that part of LA, I think.
Altadena is a historically Black neighborhood, but yes, I mean, they were, Palisades is one of the most affluent communities in the city, or anywhere actually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we seem to be still unable to make the difficult collective decisions, but it seems like nature is coming, not just nature, this created catastrophe is coming for us, and events are changing the ground truth.
The reactions to it have been, I don't know. I guess we don't really need to discuss what we know in terms of what Republicans are saying, in terms of the fight over what the federal government should have to pay and so on. And then obviously just, a lot of conspiracies, I mean, like, I don't know how closely you follow those. It's easy to look away from them and hope people don't pay attention to them. It's like Mel Gibson goes on Joe Rogan. What a massive platform. And that guy's saying, not only do he has friends that beat stage 4 cancer using ivermectin, but, these fires weren't just started. Like, that kind of conspiracy theory stuff, it really takes hold. How do we continue to try to combat that in this new age when those kind of things, crazy things are being said and being believed? We're even debating whether or not Elon Musk gave a Nazi salute. I have eyes.
Yeah. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of mental fortitude, I think, to stop yourself, because I understand why people pass these stories around about the true causes of the fire, because it's very scary. It's very hard to accept that we're at the mercy of forces that no one on earth can control right now. They're outside our control. We can be more resilient. We can be smarter in how we build and where we build. And I'm not to say that our hands are tied, and obviously we need to keep working on the root causes, but that's a lot to take in, and it's a lot simpler, a lot less mental effort would go into just pointing the finger if you can make yourself believe that,
You have this great piece out today that I want to obviously get to. I've been kind of trying to say these things and come to these conclusions, but I'm not nearly as thoughtful or as great a writer as you are. And you put them all in order in a way and in words that really make sense about how we're supposed to kind of cope and stay engaged, which I think is really important. We had this really interesting conversation. It was like 80 listeners at our hangout I host every week, which I still want you to stop by anytime you want and join us and talk to us. But there was like a white guy who said, and others who said, I had to punch out. Had to look away. Can't deal with it right now. I'm starting to come back, but I've still, filled that space with other things, sports and things. Yeah. Then we had this black woman, Kimberly. She just says like, no, you can't punch out. We need you. You got to stay in. It's too easy. It's easy to say and all that. And then I'm trying to check my bias, which is, the more crazy, the more scary, the more likely people are to turn to me. And the more I benefit from that in some way. And I don't want that. I want people to have good mental health. But the truth is that several things are true at once. We have to take care of our own mental health, as well as stay engaged. Why don't you take it from there and then we can go through specifics? I
love that you have this curated community. I love that you've built the trust with these people. I love that you take it seriously. I think punching in and punching out is a great metaphor, because if you've ever been in a union, I have, you got to take your breaks, right? You got to clock out sometimes. A lot of us act like social media is our full-time job. You're not supposed to be on there 15 hours a day. You're not supposed to be on there first thing in the morning, last thing at night. So dedicating that time. But then when you're on it, what are you doing? We're all nodes in this network of information. And that has to do with your conversation with the garbage man, your kid's teacher or your kid. As well as the things you're reading, retweeting, amplifying. So thinking of ourselves as having that responsibility, I think, is where we start to think about, okay, yeah, like it's not just how much time am I spending on this, but I do need to spend that time wisely, learning actual real things about real events that happen to real people.
Yeah, all those are, I think, very, very important points and important to the process. You say step one is check in with your feelings as you read the news. It's really important these times. First of all, this check-in might tell you when you need to take a break. Secondly, it tells you to pause before you pass a piece of news along. I like that. Finally, it tells you when to investigate more. The problem there that I realize is I want to do what you just said. All that makes sense, but I don't know how to check in with my feelings until I started meditating, which helped me have the language of understanding, recognize the thoughts I'm thinking right now. So now this time around, given that I'm covering the news for a living, it's going to make me crazy all day. So now when I read the thing or I see the thing or I hear the thing and it makes me crazy, I have a couple little sayings that are kind of funny, some whatever you want, but like not today, Satan. Yeah. Because if you get upset, and you get really emotional, number one, that time is gone and you're giving your power away to something or someone bad. And number two, and even worse, you go to your partner, you go to your kid, and you take it out on them. And the kid or your partner's like, wait, why are you so upset? Like, I'm sorry. I just read that he pardoned a whole bunch of terrible people and I took it out on you. So the check-in, how do you use more specific language on how you can do that throughout your day and life?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think you nailed it. But just on the very basic level, and this is from Mike Caulfield, right? And he has developed this. It's a randomized controlled trial tested method called the SIFT method. STOP is number one, the S in SIFT. And the check-in, physiologically, right? Heart pounding, dry mouth, your gall is rising. And it's not just anger. It's also the hell yeah, stick it to them. The self-righteousness is the other arm of what gets us to share and pass stuff along, maybe without thinking or investigating. Well, okay, did this happen? That's one question. The second question is this a real event? Is this a thing? Or is it just some talking point, that we're using to get outraged about? And I wrote about this in the piece. Yeah, Elon gave a Nazi salute, and that sucks. And I'm very upset about it. I don't need to consume any more content about that. It's it happened. We're on this path. It's very scary. There's bad stuff is going to happen every day. I don't need to discuss who thinks it was and who thinks it wasn't, because
that's a shame, because I have a 10-hour special coming on just that moment.
You totally could though, right?
Yes.
There's been a million hours that we didn't spend talking about the refugees that are not going to get to come to the U.S. the people that are being intimidated right now. The people right now in my city and yours whose families are keeping them home from school because they think that ICE is going to come while they're at school. That's what we should be talking about.
Absolutely. We have to prioritize those things when with whatever we're covering and whatever we're consuming, because most people listening aren't covering or creating material or doing journalism. You talk about learning about the events with real impacts on real people. Of the flurry of executive orders designed to, quote, shock and awe us, according to Slate, Trump's executive orders on immigration, suspending the refugee resettlement program, and attempting to end birthright citizenship are both unusual and potentially consequential, Deborah Pearlstein said. This is where people need to pay attention and worry and investigate further. That's a really important, I think, example to give. Those are real people's lives being affected dramatically. Why? What are we going to do about that?
What are we going to do about it is a great question. So, you know, with
sentences, this is the Nazi shit right here. You wrote. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, yes, because you know, it's like first they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up. I mean, the people that just got here, you know, whatever I'm sure people in your audience have different views on immigration, but they are our most vulnerable, right? Like, I took my kids to see Ellis Island. This is what the nation was founded on. It's founded on letting people in, giving them a path. So that's why it's important. I mean, it's morally important. These people are vulnerable. It goes straight to our identity, the heart of our identity as a nation, why we are this nation, how we got to be this nation. So, yeah. What are we doing about it? There's been a temporary 2-week injunction on the birthright citizenship order from a Western Circuit judge. There's 2 lawsuits total, 22 states against it. So that's cool. We can maybe stop that. It's blatantly unconstitutional. The immigration stuff, state by state and city by city. And I think there's local efforts on the ground to aid. Something I shared today was a collaborative map where people are literally posting where they saw ICE in their neighborhood by address.
I want to see that. Did you link that somewhere?
I linked to it on Blue Sky. It's a Padlet, so anybody can contribute, and it's like down to the level of address.
Wow.
So watch those guys. And then there's, so there's a lot of stuff happening in the courts, and then there's a lot of stuff happening at the grassroots level. There are lots of know your rights trainings happening in churches and schools, community groups. I link in the Substack to a community group that has, the information that you can Xerox, you can pass out, make it available at your community fridge or anywhere else so that people know, don't open the door to ICE, this type of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be that kind of like grassroots level activism. Obviously, we can't all do all of it. What is your chunk, right? What is your little piece that you can contribute?
Well, I passed that along last night on the Hangout, and I said, and this, you mentioned it at the end of this piece, which I think is such good advice. I really like this. We all need to focus in our lives on any number of things. We all have ADHD, it seems, yes. But you write, no one can keep up with everything that's going on. We have to pick our battles. Set up a Google alert for keywords like immigration or reproductive rights. Be intentional about who you follow or unfollow. As a corollary, I recommend being in conversation with friends and neighbors who know about different issues and topics and pooling your knowledge. And it really resonated with me because for a long time, my particular focus of activism, of where I thought I could have the most direct impact locally, was in my school board fights. And it was so important that I was involved with that, as traumatic as it was and as awful as it was. That's where I could really, make a difference in terms of my activism. And so whatever it is, if women's reproductive rights, climate, whatever it is, setting a Google alert, staying focused on that issue, you could get away with, I think, and maintain your credibility and integrity, not paying much attention to the news if the work you're doing is actually impacting and helping people. So I really like that advice, and I guess pick it up from there as to how that actually takes place in your life and why you gave it.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I've just been lucky enough to be part of a community of folks who have been able to combine like their interests and their passions with their work. So I have friends who work as public defenders. I have friends who work in the family courts. I have friends who work on criminal justice reform, LGBTQ rights, grassroots climate action and the city council level, on the state level, the federal level. And so that's where you get like a brain trust effect. And instead of getting together with your friends talking about this shitty thing that Elon Musk did, you can maybe have a conversation where you're learning and listening. And, you know, and that's how we get bigger and better together. And I think that's going to be a big part of it too, right? You need to build community as we're going through this, because we're doing this collective sense making, and that's part of the power that we have to build.
Yes, I keep hearing that, and I keep thinking about it, and I accidentally did it in the pandemic, built this community around the show, and it proves itself over and over and over. One of the interesting things that, you know, it hasn't been done intentional. Now I am, because I know how important it is. I'm really trying to keep it and grow it and make it dynamic. But you know, you get together with 50 or 80 people last night, and they're all over the country. And I'm so lucky that it's a very diverse group of people ethnically and they're age wise. Even we allowed a couple Canadians in, Anya, I know, but you know, they're going to be Americans soon. So they report in from the different parts of the country on the climate issues, on the immigration issues raid, on any number of other things. Somebody's affected by a mass violence incident. Well, guess what? Sadly, someone over here has too, and people have connected, become friends, and it's proven to be the best resource that I accidentally have been part of. And I really am so invested in that because exactly of what you're saying. So I highly encourage people to find one or more of those types of communities to be involved in. So just to echo that, I guess.
How do people get to join your community, Pete?
They have to come to the house. Put their hand on a Spider-Man comic. Yeah, it's just a Patreon, you know. I mean, I do the podcast and everything is free.
Yeah.
And then once you're a paid subscriber, you get the links to the Hangouts and there's a Discord chat, and it's an automatic community. And these communities are, you know, popping up all over the place. And it depends on so many things as I suppose the personalities in there. I've been involved jumped into a few of them. What about you? Have you been involved in like these virtual communities? And what about yours, of your longtime readers list, followers, supporters?
Yeah, no, I have to say, I think something that doesn't totally suck right now is the evolution in social media that we're going through, because like the decisive move to Blue Sky and the energy that's happening there away from X, the growth on Substack. I've been in Substack now for a year and a half, and it's been, not only has it been growing for me personally, but the feedback, the community is so positive, and people really are trying to build something together. I feel so much support from, you know, people my size, people who are bigger, and there's like big, huge, legit people coming on there all the time. So those two things really feel like something new is happening, and people are getting
telling on Substack 2 years ago. I mean, it's just another thing, but it feels like a full-time thing too. But it's a great place to be discovered, and someone like yourself with your credibility, it's like, and to be involved. Do you talk to a lot of people on that are, you know, subscribers and readers?
Yeah, it's getting more interactive with comments, with posts. And then honestly, I've connected with other writers, and people will reach out and like get on a Zoom call with me and we'll just talk strategy, like on the writer to writer level. So it's really cool. I got to say, it's really cool what's happening.
Well, before I let you go, have you made any choices or decisions about how you might do anything differently? You feel like you're involved in a lot of different efforts, organizations, and your own stuff. I don't know, but I mean, maybe you're working on a new book. Maybe you're thinking about doing things differently with your Substack or anywhere else. I love all of what you do, no matter what. So I follow and support. I mean, if you decided to join a pit crew and an IndyCar, like if Anya's going to do it, it sounds probably, it must be interesting. She's going to share something that's of value. So what are you doing? Anything differently or new under this new descent into chaos, into fascism?
Substack is picking up. I'm thinking about adding a weekly roundup post, because I had one that did really well last week about just what's happening in the news, what you should like.
I like that. I saw that and I liked it more. I'm here for that for sure.
Cool. And then I've got monthly podcast episodes coming out, also. And then I'm working on a book, which is about the emotional landscape of the times right now.
Ooh. Say just one more thing about that then, because that's where we started and that's where we'll end in terms of this week. And you're not just talking about the political, I'm sure you're talking about the climate, you're talking about tech and I'm sure all the other, what's the word you taught us?
Polycrisis. Yeah. It's all the things. It's the big bad. It's all connected. It's all self-amplifying. It's making us go crazy. It's on our phones all the time. And there's specific psychology and sort of depth psychology that is speaking to these things that are collective. Because I think we have, for better or for worse, we have the Western view of mental health is this personal, individual. It's a brain in a jar. Maybe it's your family system. But it's not the collective. It's not you and the collective and how we feel these feelings and how we process them. And so that's what I'm like trying to tap into a little bit.
I love it.
I'm new to it. You know me, like I come from a very left-brained perspective, very logic, very analysis. And so it's a little bit about me and my baby steps into becoming a feelings literate person.
Well, I mean, you'll do it the same way you do everything. So I'm very excited about that. And you got to come by one of the hangouts and just share with us. Just go through your posts or whatever. Take a few questions or something because we'd love to have you and your everything that you always bring. I will let you go. I'm so glad. I appreciate you making time for me today for us. And I'll talk to you soon, Anya. Keep up the great work. It's really important. You're important. We need it now more than ever.
You too, Pete. Thanks for checking in. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, Anya Kamenetz, everybody. What did you think? Isn't she great? Go subscribe to her Substack at The Golden Hour and let her know that you heard her here. Follow her on Blue Sky and everywhere else. It's all in the show links, all the ways to reach and support Anya Kamenetz, one of the best independent journalists out there. So glad that she joined me today. And I look forward to seeing you tonight at our hangout at 8 p.m. East. If you're not a subscriber, sign up now, patreon.com/Pete Dominic. You can always pay more if you have it. And I'd love that. I'd appreciate that. I'd be very grateful for it because I can't do it without your support. The podcast is free, but it isn't cheap. Put a lot into it every day. So thank you very much for your support. Write a rating, review, share it with your friends on social media and all the rest. All right, johncarroll.org is where you can support and buy John's music. And I hope that you'll do that as well. He takes us in and out every day. So take it away, my friend.
Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep things right. We got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence, even if it